This is lesson 79 for Algebra 1. Let me write that up here. Lesson 79. And these variables are called subscripted variables. As you can see, there's 2 letters for each variable up here. And the reason they do that is in rate, time, and distance problems later, you will have these where rate times time equals distance. And so they're introducing that to you now by showing you how to solve for them in algebraically. Therefore, we are going to substitute in the values for these different variables, and I'm going to show you how. So in this case, the little subscripts are representative of like a person's name, for instance. So like the rate for Allie times the time for Allie plus the rate for Peter times the time for Peter. They're right next to each other, so that means multiplication, and they're separated by a plus sign. So you add those together and you get 320. Then over here, the given information is the rate for Peter is 50, the time for Peter is 4, and the time for Allie is 3. R is always representative of rate, time, T is for time, and then D is distance, which they're not showing in this particular equation. Now we're going to rewrite the problem, substituting in these values that they gave for each of these subscripted variables. So rate for Allie is the only one we don't have. And that is how you know you can solve this, because you can only solve for one variable at a time. If you had 2 variables in here, you'd have to use substitution or elimination to get to the point where you only had 1. We have 3 of the 4. 1, 2, 3, 4 variables. 1, 2, 3 givens. We can solve for this one that's missing. So we have rate for Allie, and I'm going to put in parentheses what time for Allie is. That would be 3. Put the plus sign. Rate for Peter, instead of writing R subscript P, and that's how you say it, R subscript P. I would put a 50. Right next to it, new parentheses, because they're multiplied, time for Peter. And I just made up a P for Peter. It'd be 4 equals 320. Now I do the math. I have 3 RA. I'm going to rewrite it like this, because this is how we write variables. We put the number in front and the variable after. Plus, that would be 200 equals 320. I'm going to subtract 200 from both sides to isolate the variable. That cancels that out. So we have 3 RA equals 120. I'm going to divide 3 from both sides to isolate my variable. The rate for Allie would equal 40, because 120 divided by 3 is 40, and that would be your answer. I want you to do, since there's hardly any on this one, I want you to do example 2 and example 3 and example 4, and then do A and B. And you could subtract 3 problems from your problem set and only do 7 from the problem set if you do all 3 examples. That way you can check your work as you go and make sure you got this. This is super simple. I'm not even going to do another example because it's the exact same thing again and again. The only difference in one of them is they have a distributive property. They have an 80 out front, and then they have the time for Larry minus 5 inside of that, and you will put that, you will multiply that out. So that would be 80 times Larry minus 400. So that's just an extra step they added in to example 3 that you will see in a minute, and it's not hard at all. Using the distributive property of something we have done many times before. This should be pretty easy, and we will be back with the next lesson shortly.